Pontiac's War, also known as Pontiac's Rebellion, was a significant conflict that occurred in the Great Lake region of North America between 1763 and 1766. It was named after Pontiac, a prominent Ottawa leader who played a central role in organizing the Native American resistance against the British rule. Here's a brief description of the key details about Pontiac's War. The conflicts arose following the conclusion of the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763, also known as the Seven Years' War. The French, who had made significant allies of various Native American tribes, ceded control of their North American territories to the British in the Treaty of Paris in 1763. This transfer of control alarmed many Native American groups as they feared British encroachment on their lands and the imposition of British authority. Several factors contributed to the outbreak of Pontiac's War. These included British policies that sought to assert control over Native American lands and limit their autonomy, discontent among Native American tribes due to the British presence and policies, including the construction of forts and settlements on Native lands, economic pressures on Native Americans as a result of British fur trade policies. There were also rumors and fears that the British planned to exterminate or forcibly remove Native American populations. Pontiac was an influential Ottawa leader, emerged as a key figure in organizing a resistance against the British. He forged alliances with other Native American groups, including the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Huron, among others, to launch coordinated attacks on British forts and settlements. Pontiac's war officially began on May 7, 1763, when Native American forces led by Pontiac launched a surprise attack on Fort Detroit. This assault marked the beginning of a series of coordinated attacks on British forts and settlements throughout the region. Native American forces utilized a combination of guerrilla warfare tactics, ambushes, and sieges to besiege and attack British forts and settlements. They effectively disrupted British supply lines and communications, causing significant hardship for British garrisons. The British initially struggled to contain the Native American uprising. However, they eventually adopted a strategy of fortification and counterattacks, reinforcing key forts and launching expeditions to suppress Native American resistance. Pontiac's war gradually petered out by 1766. The conflict was never decisively concluded through a formal peace treaty. Instead, a combination of British military pressure, diplomatic negotiation, and exhaustion amongst Native American tribes led to a gradual cessation of hostilities. Pontiac's war had significant consequences for both Native American and British relations in North America. It further strained relationships between Native Americans and British Crown, leading to ongoing conflicts and tensions in the decades that followed. Additionally, the war contributed to the British government's decision to implement the Proclamation of 1763, which aimed to limit westward expansion and settlement in the American colonies, further exacerbating the tension between colonists and the British authorities. Pontiac's war involved several key figures on both Native Americans and British sides. Here's some of the prominent individuals involved. Pontiac, also known as Obwadiwag, was a prominent Ottawa leader who played a central role in organizing the Native American resistance against British rule. He was the primary architect of the uprising and led numerous attacks on British forts and settlements throughout the Great Lakes regions. Chief Goa-Suta was a Seneca leader who allied himself with Pontiac and played significant role in coordinating attacks on British forts in Ohio County. Major Henry Gladwin was the commanding officer of Fort Detroit during the initial attack by Pontiac's forces in May 1763. He played a crucial role in defending the fort against the Native American siege and coordinated British efforts to suppress the uprising. Sir Geoffrey Amherst was a British commander in chief of North America during Pontiac's War. Although he was not directly involved in the conflict on the ground, his policies and decisions regarding Native American relations and military strategies influenced the course of the war. Colonel Henry Bouquet was a British Army officer who led expeditions against Native American forces in Ohio Country. He was particularly known for his successful campaign in 1764, which culminated in the Battle of Bushy Run, where his forces defeated a coalition of Native American tribes. Captain Simon Iquelier. Simon Iquelier was a British officer who commanded Fort Pitt, present-day Pittsburgh, during Pontiac's War. He played a crucial role in defending the fort against Native American attacks and implementing defense measures to withstand the siege. Chief Kiwatinawin, also known as Wabakinin or Wabake, was an Ojibwe chief who allied himself with Pontiac and participated in attacks against the British forts in the upper Great Lakes region. Captain James Dallywell was a British officer who led an expedition to relieve the siege of Fort Detroit in 1763. He was unfortunately unalived in action during a failed attempt to ambush the Native American forces near the fort. This was just a brief presentation of some of the key individuals, amongst others, who played a significant role in shaping the course and outcome of Pontiac's War. Their actions and decisions influenced the dynamics of the conflicts between Native American tribes and the British authorities in North America. Pontiac's War involved a coalition of various Native American tribes from the Great Lakes regions. And beyond, who joined forces to resist the British expansion and assert their sovereignty over their ancestral lands. Here's a brief description of some of the key Native American tribes involved in the conflict. The Ottawa, led by Pontiac himself, played a central role in organizing and leading the uprising against the British. They were influential in initiating attacks on British forts on the western Great Lake region, including Fort Detroit. The Ojibwe or Chippewa. The Ojibwe were another major indigenous group involved in the Pontiac's War. They formed an alliance with Pontiac and participated in the attacks on British forts and settlements, particularly in Upper Great Lakes region. The Potawatomi were closely allied with the Ottawa and the Ojibwe and actively participated in the uprising against the British. They were involved in the attacks and on British forts and settlements in the western Great Lakes region and the Ohio country. The Wendat, otherwise known as the Huron, were traditional allies of the French and played a significant role in the Pontiac's War. They joined the coalition led by Pontiac and participated in attacks on the British forts and settlements, particularly in the Ohio country. The Seneca, which was one of the five nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, were involved in Pontiac's war primarily through their alliance with Pontiac and the participation in attacks on British forts in Ohio country. The Delaware or Lenape were involved in the Pontiac's War primarily through their participation in the attacks on British settlements and communities in the Ohio country and the western frontier. Although the Shawnee were not initially involved in the Pontiac's War to the same extent as other tribes, some Shawnee bands joined the conflict later and participated in attacks on British forts and settlements, particularly in the Ohio country. The Mingo, a multi ethnic group composed of various Native American tribes and European settlers, were involved in Pontiac's War primarily through their alliance with Pontiac and participation in attacks on British forts and settlements in Ohio country. These tribes, amongst many others, formed a coalition to resist British expansion and assert their sovereignty over their ancestral lands during Pontiac's War. Their coordinated efforts and military actions significantly impacted the course and outcome of the conflict. The classification of Pontiac's War from 1763 to 1766 as a genocide is a matter of interpretation and debate among historians and scholars. Genocide is defined by the United Nations as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Whether Pontiac's War meets this definition depends on several factors and perspectives. One of the key aspects of genocide is the presence of intent to destroy a particular group. In Pontiac's War, while there were undoubtedly violent actions taken against the British settlers and soldiers, it is debated whether the intent of the Native Americans were resistance was to completely eliminate the British population or whether it was primarily aimed at resisting British expansion and protecting Native American lands and autonomy. Genocide typically also involves widespread and systematic violence directed against a specific group. While Pontiac's War involved significant violence and attacks on British forts and settlements, it may not have reached the scale of the other historical genocides such as the Holocaust or the Rwandan genocide. Also, the ultimate outcome of the Pontiac's War was not the destruction or elimination of the British population in North America. The conflict also gradually subsided, and there was no systematic efforts to eradicate the British settlers. Finally, it's essential to consider the historical context of the Pontiac's War within the broader dynamics of European colonization and Native American resistance in North America. This context includes centuries of displacement, violence, and dispossession experienced by Native American peoples which may inform interpretations of the conflict. While some scholars argue about the violence and displacement experienced by British settlers during the Pontiac's War could be considered as a form of genocide, Others contend that the conflict does not meet the specific criteria outlined in international legal definitions of genocide. Ultimately, the classification of Pontiac's war as genocide is subject to interpretation and varies depending on individual perspectives and scholarly analysis.